When Russia unveiled the T-14 Armata at the 2015 Victory Day parade, it was hailed as the future of armored warfare. Its design, a protected crew capsule, unmanned turret with autoloader, advanced sensors, and a versatile chassis, seemed revolutionary, promising to surpass Western tanks. Yet nearly a decade later, the T-14 is still a prototype. Production has stalled, engines have failed, and changing warfare has eroded its relevance. Instead of a breakthrough, the Armata has become a symbol of unfulfilled ambition, rooted in decades of Soviet and Russian tank design. The seeds of the Armata, the roots of the T-14, can be traced back to the Yom Kippur War of 1973. During that conflict, Soviet-designed tanks like the T-55 and T-62 faced Western technology in the hands of Israeli forces. The war demonstrated that tanks were increasingly vulnerable to modern anti-tank missiles, artillery, and air power. Both the West and the East realized that tank warfare was changing forever. In the West, the response was straightforward: heavier and better armored vehicles. The United States began developing the M1 Abrams, while Britain worked on the Challenger, both using new composite armors that made them far more survivable but also significantly heavier. The Soviet Union, however, did not immediately embrace the same path. Instead, engineers at the Morozov Design Bureau in Kharkiv, Ukraine, began working on radical designs that sought to improve crew survivability by separating ammunition storage from crew compartments. This was a novel idea, given the tendency of Soviet tanks to explode catastrophically when hit. At the time, however, technology had not matured enough to bring these concepts to life. The 1980s, bold prototypes and ambitious engines. By the 1980s, the Soviet government gave the green light to more ambitious development programs. Several new projects emerged that attempted to rethink armored warfare. The Kharkiv Design Bureau produced vehicles such as Object 490A and Object 490B, both of which pushed futuristic ideas like crewless turrets, armored crew capsules, and integration into networked warfare concepts. These designs were meant to transmit battlefield information in real time, connecting tanks with artillery, aircraft, and support vehicles. Object 490B even mounted a massive 152mm gun, far more powerful than the standard 125mm guns that equipped most Soviet tanks. At the same time, in Leningrad, engineers were working on Object 299, another highly experimental tank that also adopted the principles of separating crew, ammunition, and turret. These projects, while never fully realized, planted the conceptual seeds that would eventually be inherited by the T-14. Powering these advanced designs required equally ambitious engines. In Ukraine, the Malyshev Bureau created the 6TD diesel engine, which initially produced 1,000 horsepower but could be upgraded to 1,200. Meanwhile, in Chelyabinsk, the tractor plant engineers developed the 2V12 engine, capable of generating 1,200 horsepower and theoretically expandable to an astonishing 2,000. These engines, especially the Chelyabinsk design, would become the ancestors of the troubled engines that continue to plague the T-14 program today. Collapse of the USSR and the search for a successor. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 devastated its defense industry. Funding dried up, design bureaus were scattered across newly independent states, and Russia inherited a massive but outdated arsenal of tanks. The T-72 and T-80 dominated its inventory, but their weaknesses were brutally exposed in Chechnya during the 1990s. Poorly protected and operating under outdated doctrine, these tanks suffered heavy losses, underscoring the need for a new generation of armored vehicles. Two major projects emerged to address this gap. One was the T-90 program, which essentially upgraded the T-72 with improved armor, optics, and firepower. The T-90 was cheap enough to produce in numbers and became Russia's main battle tank. The other project, however, was far more ambitious. Known as Object 195, this tank was designed around a longer chassis, a 1,500 horsepower A85 engine, and that same monstrous 152mm gun first envisioned in the 1980s. It included advanced reactive armor, modern optics, and an armored crew capsule. In many ways, it was the spiritual predecessor of the T-14. Tests in the early 2000s showed promise, but problems quickly piled up. The engine suffered from reliability issues. The 152mm gun proved too unwieldy, and costs spiraled. When project leaders asked for more money in 2005, they were denied. Object 195 was shelved, and once again, Russia was left with upgraded legacy tanks instead of a next-generation breakthrough. A new dawn with the T-14 Armata. A decade later, Russia tried again. In 2015, during the Grand Military Parade in Moscow, the world was introduced to the T-14 Armata. Unlike its predecessors, the Armata was not designed as a standalone tank, but as part of a family of armored vehicles. Alongside the T-14 main battle tank were the T-15 infantry fighting vehicle, the T-16 recovery vehicle, and the two S-35 Koalitsiya self-propelled artillery system, all sharing the same chassis. The idea was to streamline production and maintenance while creating a modular platform for modern warfare. The presentation, however, was marred by an embarrassing incident. One of the T-14s broke down in the middle of Red Square during the rehearsal, refusing to start again. The symbolism was hard to miss. A tank that was meant to showcase Russia's engineering strength instead displayed its vulnerability before the eyes of the world. Inside the T-14 Armata, the T-14 Armata introduced a groundbreaking design. Its three-man crew sat in an armored capsule at the front, separated from the ammunition for greater survivability. Behind them, an unmanned turret housed a 125mm 2A82 gun with an improved autoloader that stored rounds vertically. The armor combined heavy frontal protection with the Afghanit active defense system, which used radar and countermeasures to intercept missiles. This approach reduced the need for thick turret armor and promised protection against threats like javelins and other top-attack weapons. The engine crisis. The T-14's greatest weakness was its engine. The A85-3, derived from a 1980s design, was rated at 1,500 horsepower but proved unreliable with overheating, oil issues, and frequent breakdowns. A redesigned V-shaped version also failed, and by 2020 officials reverted to the flawed original. A 2023 review declared the engine obsolete and recommended a fresh design, leaving the Armata without a viable power plant and stuck in limbo. The turret problem. The turret too revealed its shortcomings over time. Initial images suggested heavy protection, but detailed analysis showed that much of it consisted of thin steel plating. Only the roof carried reactive armor, leaving the sides and frontal areas far more vulnerable than expected. This meant that even 20 to 30mm autocannons, the kind mounted on infantry fighting vehicles like the American Bradley, could damage the turret's optics and sensors. This design might have been sufficient in the early 2000s when traditional anti-tank missiles were the primary threat. But by the 2020s, drones had transformed the battlefield. Cheap first-person view drones and precision-guided top-attack munitions could bypass the Afghanit system entirely. Unlike Israel's trophy system, which has been adapted to counter drones, Afghanit was not designed with this threat in mind. The result was a futuristic-looking turret that is ironically outdated for the realities of modern warfare. The chassis and firepower. The T-14's chassis was stronger. The entire frontal area of the vehicle was heavily armored with composite blocks and reactive layers, covering both the crew capsule and ammunition storage. Side skirts also provided additional protection. However, the rear of the vehicle, where the engine was housed, remained poorly protected, making it easy to disable the tank with a well-placed strike to its flanks. In terms of firepower, the T-14 carried advanced armor-piercing rounds such as the Vacuum one, which in theory could penetrate any modern Western tank. Its gun, optics, and autoloader were all capable of impressive battlefield performance. But without mass production, these capabilities remain largely theoretical. The Armata family that never was. The T-14 was meant to anchor a whole family of vehicles: the T-15 infantry fighting vehicle, T-16 recovery vehicle, Coalizia artillery, and others like a BMP T-3 and mortar carriers. None reached service. Sanctions cut off key optics. The engine problem lingered, costs soared, and shifting warfare, especially drones, forced constant redesigns. The Armata family never materialized. Why the T-14? May never truly arrive. The T-14 Armata, intended as a showcase of Russian independence, instead exposed the limits of its defense industry. Lacking Western components, a reliable engine, and the capacity for mass production, the program stalled. With the war in Ukraine demanding large numbers of cheaper tanks, Russia has relied on refurbished T-72s, T-80s, and even T-62s. Costly, unproven, and complex, the T-14 has been reduced to a parade piece rather than a battlefield weapon. And that wraps up today's deep dive into the T-14 Armata, a tank that promised the future but seems stuck in the past. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to see more content like this, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.